Hello everyone, we'll give it another minute or two, I think, for people to join before we begin. Can still see the participant numbers increasing, which is great. So we'll give it another few seconds. Okay, I think we can kick off. So welcome everybody. My name's Bob Burgoyne from Connected Places Catapult. I led the development of the Net Zero Navigator tool from our side. Just like to thank Useful Projects, Space Syntax, Expedition Engineering, who developed the original tool. Also Carbon Disclosure Project, CDP, who provided a lot of expertise on emissions reporting and action for places. And of course, OnePlanet, who we've partnered with over the last few months to implement the tool locally. And I'm here with Puran Desai, founder of OnePlanet, who will introduce formally a bit later on. So thanks everyone for joining. This is a session, as it says, about getting to net zero locally, and to talk you through some practical tools that we're launching today, targeted at local authorities. So we'll have a 5-minute introduction, fairly brief. We'll then move on rapidly to demonstration of the Navigator tool by Useful Projects, Expedition Engineering. Move on to a demonstration of the OnePlanet platform. We'll hear a little bit from Ajit from Hounslow to talk about how she's benefited from the earlier version of the tool over the summer. Do a couple of polls of the audience to understand your priorities. And then we'll try and reserve a good amount of time at the end for a Q&A with our expert panel. If you've got any questions that occur to you as you go through, please do add them to the Zoom questionnaire function, and we'll cover those off all in a group at the end. So, as it says here, nations pledge, local government delivers in terms of climate action. Well, actually, the quote was nations pledge, cities deliver, but I thought local government is a bit more inclusive. We're obviously emerging from the chaos of COP, and there was a lot of noise and announcements made at that event by national governments. But we all recognise, of course, this is a multi-level systemic challenge that we're all facing, and a kind of centralised top-down approach won't work. Local government and local participation and action are key to addressing the challenge, and this has been reflected in the huge number of climate emergency declarations that we've seen over the past few years. An example here from Northwest Leicestershire. So we've seen lots of declarations, and indeed we've seen lots of climate action plans also being put into the public realm. And we'll send around this deck of slides afterwards, and the Climate Emergency Group have actually helpfully collated all those together into one place if you'd like to have a look at them. So 83% of councils have made a plan. So the question then might be, well, why are we all here on this webinar? And indeed, over 500 people signed up for this webinar. I'm not sure 500 joined, but still a good number of you have joined. And the reason for that is very simple. You know, declarations are relatively easy to make. Execution is hard. And actually, what we see is when organisations move to the execution phase, it often means revisiting and revising plans that might have seemed good on paper, but might need adjustment or amendment when they hit the hard reality of actually trying to get things done. And this is the result of a number of different factors, but we've captured kind of 3 here. that local authorities grapple with, and balancing competing priorities, particularly in a kind of pandemic-ridden world. Priorities are many, and it's difficult to work out where to start. There's often capacity, capability, and knowledge gaps within an organisation, and it's a problem which can't be solved by one entity alone. So there's a big need for partnership in this space, and all of those things mean, in sum, that there's lots of challenges, and solutions need hard work. They need collaboration, and they need an honest appraisal of what is needed to kind of move forwards. And it's in recognition of all of these challenges that Connected Places Catapult partnered with a range of local authorities and others earlier this year to start to develop these solutions. And so some of those partners that we were lucky to work with are mentioned on screen here, so Useful, Simple, Trust. And we partnered with them and Space Syntax because they bring technical expertise on sort of system level challenges. This is a system level problem. They're good at building capacity, building interventions. And of course, they've both worked with local authorities for years. So they were our partners on this journey, but we also made sure that we involved with lots of local authorities in the development of this tool. We had some discovery sessions in January, I believe it was. And then we also got extremely helpful feedback from local authorities throughout the development process. All of this kind of informs the characteristics of the tools that we're going to share with you later on today. And I'll go through some of the most important factors on screen here. So one of the things that the Net Zero Navigator tool does that we've heard is useful is it helps councils identify others that share similar characteristics and challenges. And we've all seen, reports that talk about best practice, but in abstraction, best practice is not a particularly useful concept. Best practice needs to be contextualized and needs to be sort of grounded in local realities. What best practice looks like for a large city is quite different from what it might look like for a small rural local authority. So this peer learning piece is quite important, we feel. What the tool also does is it allows you to look at the emissions profile and other characteristics of your area and feed those into implications for what you might want to prioritize. It allows you to start from scratch and use the tool to create a strategy from a blank sheet of paper. But importantly, it also allows you to stress test the strategy you might already have created, see what gaps exist, etc. One of the most compelling elements we found from talking to local authorities through the development process is the co-benefits story. And touching on that challenge of balancing priorities I mentioned earlier, co-benefits are really helpful in building an alternative narrative to simple decarbonisation to support action. So if you're able to tell a story of how taking action and making interventions not only reduces emissions, but also creates jobs or improves biodiversity or improves health outcomes locally, then that really builds the case and allows you to get buy-in and build momentum. And finally, and practically speaking, the tool allows you to help specialist resources, to find specialist resources to fill in the detail of plans. I'll invite Puran now to talk a bit about the OnePlanet platform and how it will help you deliver those plans.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bob, and thanks everyone for joining today. So OnePlanet is built on about 30 years of working in sustainability, and the last 25 years helping companies, communities, cities around the world introduce zero carbon strategies. And over the last 5 years, we've been looking at a digital platform to help collaboration. And we hope as you try the tool, you'll see the benefits of that in terms of being able to operationalize the plans, to allocate actions to people, to monitor, to communicate with your colleagues and with stakeholders. And for us, really, sustainability has been about understanding the interconnectedness of things, so that we can create more joined up actions. And this enables us to, the platform enables us to connect different departments together, as my colleague Ben will show, around these co-benefits. And as Bob said, co-benefits are a really critical part of engaging the public and other departments in your local government in action around climate change. So whether that's health, jobs, or inclusivity, levelling up, whatever those co-benefits might be. And in our system, we call those co-benefit shared outcomes. But our platform also enables you then to take those shared outcomes or co-benefits and the carbon benefits and also engage the wider community, the business community, citizens, schools, and others. So really looking forward to showing you how that works, and really keen to work with some of the early adopters who might start using this tool over the next couple of months before we launch properly in January.
Brilliant. Thanks, Piran. So just another couple of comments, I guess, before we get on to the demos. The first one is a disclaimer. Perfect is the enemy of the done. The tool that we're launching today is launched in beta. There will inevitably be a few bugs, but we felt it was urgent to provide something, given the urgency of the challenge, and we're sure that there's a lot of value that you'll be able to get out of the tool in its current form. We'll be continuing to make improvements to the user experience over the next couple of months, and we'll be running some how-to sessions. So OnePlanet will be running some how-to sessions in the next few weeks to get you started quickly. We're also planning a service offer around this. So simply providing a tool is helpful, but we feel there's some value to be offered in providing support around that. But we're keen to kind of shape that with the participation and contribution of local authorities, as we've done throughout the process. So we'll be running some sessions in the new year, looking for input, as I say, to shape what that service offer looks like. So we'll share this deck of slides with everyone on this call at the end, and there'll be information in there on how to sign up for those sessions. So just quickly thanking our expert contributors, Aether, Anthesis, CAG Consultants, Ricardo, Bureau Happold, and UK GBC, for their contributions to the tool. And then I'll hand over at this point to David and Letitia to do a demo.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Letitia Van Krasli, and I'm here with David Hewlett. As mentioned by Bob, we're from Useful Projects and Expedition, which sit under the Useful Simple Trust, and we collaborated with Space Syntax to develop the original Excel-based proof of concept tool. And we've been supporting OnePlanet in moving it on this online platform, which makes your user experience a lot more enjoyable. The Net Zero Navigator tool has been designed as a strategic thinking tool that helps all local authorities in the UK develop, review, or assess their sustainability plan or carbon neutral strategies. In the guide and instruction section, you'll see that over 300 local authorities have made ambitious net zero pledges. These pledges are just as important as the route that you will take to meet the ambition set in your targets. We only have a few years to reduce our emissions, and local authorities are uniquely placed to collaborate with other stakeholders to deliver tangible co-benefits for their local communities. To encourage swift actions, we have developed a zero carbon framework, which looks at a range of interconnected systems to meet net zero targets. First, you have your enablers, which run from the governance all the way to information. These will not lead to significant carbon dioxide reduction. They will build the capacity of your organization and partners to deliver more complex intervention in a more cost-effective manner. You will then see the innovation and services. This is everything from pilot projects, demonstrator, to servitization of products, behavioral change program, or digital services. These again build the capacity of a local authority and will deliver slightly larger carbon savings, as well as support the delivery of more complex strategic intervention. We then have the hard system in yellow here. This is where you will get your largest carbon savings, as well as most of the co-benefits for your local communities, residents, and businesses. Here in the systems, we're looking at transport, energy, building, land use, and waste. Interventions across these systems will be more complex. They will require technical expertise and building business case, which is what this tool is going to help you do. Using this framework, the tool is structured in a really easy way. One, in your inputs, you will tell the tool about your organization. Then in the place data, the tool will feed that data back to you, providing you information to help you make your own decisions. This information is then put into context, including showing the scale of the challenge and policy changes. You then have your enablers and your interventions, which is where you get to choose which projects you're going to take forward based on the data that has been provided by the tool. And then in your potential impact, the tool will show you, based on the interventions you selected, what carbon savings as well as co-benefits you could deliver. It's important to note that to have access to the full tool, you need to have a OnePlanet account. This is very easy and pain-free. And you can see at the bottom that David is signed it as himself. You will also find various pages such as the glossary and the further information, which explains the methodology behind the tool. David, over to you for inputs.
Thanks, Tisha. So this is the part of the tool where you're telling the tool about yourself, so it can then respond and give you the most useful information you can. So the first box here is where you're filling in your local authority, and we've gone with Ashford. So it's really important that you fill in this box first, because you'll find that quite a few of the others are grayed out because the tool then can't feed back to you. You then fill in your role. So we've gone with Transport Planner here, and then your zero carbon target year. You'll then be presented with some analysis that we've done on archetypes and sub-archetypes, and we've chosen 4. This is coming from the analysis that we've done in the background of the tool. So firstly, analysis by space syntax on transport. So this is looking at clustering local authorities with similar built environment conditions. So this is looking at things like population density, street network connectivity, and commute to work data. And you get results like maybe small town, small and medium cities, central London, large cities, and large local authorities out of this. The second is around renewable energy. So this is split 2 ways, by your renewable potential, whether that's higher or lower than the median, and then your forecast grid carbon. Local capacity focus is suggesting out of the 3 groups, so those already in the labour market, those who could feasibly enter by 2030, and then commuters, and which ones are most important for your ability to deliver the interventions that you choose later. And finally, looking at the different places that carbon are generated within your local authority, and which ones are relatively inefficient and you might want to focus on later. Finally, there's a suggestion of other local authorities which might have similar characteristics to you and you might want to link up with. Following that, we then ask you to input the priorities for the different co-benefits, of which we felt 4 were really important. And so those are health and well-being, inclusion, job creation, and natural capital. So you can set the priority from relatively low to relatively high, but whatever you choose, then the remaining carbon priority is always more important than any one of those individually. The important thing here is as you go through and use the tool, then interventions that have a relatively high score, for example, let's say something has a good benefit to job creation, as we pushed up the order slightly. So it will help you achieve your overall goals, and the tool will help guide you towards that. I'll hand over to Letitia for the maturity self-assessment section.
So as part of your inputs, the only part that you need to fill in is the self-assessment questionnaire. The tool is purposefully designed to encourage collaboration amongst different officers. So as part of this assessment, you'll have questions that range from have you set science-based target? Do you have a plan? Do you have robust monitoring system? How you collect data? The type of upskilling of your staff, or the type of funding arrangements that you may go through. So this is really meant to encourage different officers to talk together to best answer these type of questions, which is why there's a notes section. So if one officer is filling out the tool, but he or she doesn't have the information, then they can actually leave the question, save, and go ask the question to the officer, or ask the officer to join them to complete the self-assessment. It's really important to complete all the questions. This has an impact in how you use the tool further on. And you can see at the bottom the progress bar, allowing you to see how far along you are. We have included an I don't know question 2 to also give you this opportunity to ask the question to another officer.
Thanks, Tisha. So just moving on to the Your Place data section. So this is where we've gathered information, usually from open sources, but from a couple of closed sources as well. And these pieces of information will help you build the business cases for the different interventions that you choose. We're going to fly through here, but always happy to take a couple of questions at the end. So we're starting with your carbon profile using data from Scatter and Bayes, and then going through to this is the results of your maturity questionnaire, which you just responded to. So this graphic here is helping show the width of each of these segments, is showing roughly how important we felt each segment was. And then the proportion of it, which is filled in, is the score that we assigned you for that segment. So hopefully this section helps you understand perhaps any areas where you're already very strong, or you might need to improve to increase your overall carbon maturity as an organization. Then moving on to your areas of available skills and information pulled from the Experian Mosaic database. And then information from the analysis by space syntax on the actual and potential use of active and public transport. So you might, for example, see a large gap between actual and potential for your local authority, say in active transport. So then that might mean that's a focus area for you. Then we provide information about the energy mix. This is all just open data, but it's useful to have it in one place. And finally, analysis on the building stock within your local authority. So you might be able to identify, let's say that the typical stock of buildings is older than the national average, and then a slightly different response might be required. Letitia, is there anything you'd like to add before we go on to your future context?
The only point that's important to make is you'll find a lot of data and information about your local authority and your area and how you compare, for example, to the national average. This tool really doesn't give a specific answer. It's meant to give you all the information to build the business case and to determine what would be best for your area. So if you find that compared to the national average, your transport emissions are higher, then this may be something you want to focus on as part of the interventions that you bring forward in your plan. Thank you, David.
Thanks. So now just moving on to future context. So this is helping to show you the scale of the challenge which is in front. So just starting with population growth within your local authority, setting that the target that you've set within the context of national legislation, and then a diagram showing the scale of the challenge as compared to grid decarbonisation. So in order to meet your target year, then approximately you will require linear progress or something slightly more ambitious. And then comparing that to if you relied on grid decarbonisation alone. And we found for, I think, every local authority, you needed to take action beyond grid decarbonisation. And then just taking the scale of the challenge and turning that into some more useful and tangible units. We'll now move on to your enablers.
The enabler section is where you get to decide which enabler you would like to take forward. The initial enablers that you'll see will be the one that are tailored based on the inputs that you've put in the questionnaire, but you can also have access to all the enablers that are proposed within the tool. For each of the enablers, you will get to choose the status. So this can be either that you've already completed it, it can be something that has been planned as part of your corporate strategy, or it's something that may just not be feasible or relevant given your own needs or your local authority. Once you've selected the status, you will see different steps. So for each of the enablers, we provide 1 to 3 next steps to get you started on delivering that specific intervention. You will also find some information to build the business case. This is everything from the type of resources to where you can find additional funding, the type of impact, including how it may link with some of the strategic intervention we'll look at very shortly, and then also additional information like best practice or case studies. In the strategic intervention, it will be a similar system. Similarly, based on your place data and on where you have the biggest carbon emissions, different interventions will be proposed. These are color-coded by system. So blue, for example, is transport, making it slightly easier to look at them. you will see that there's a vast amount of interventions that you can look at, and David will soon talk about how you can filter that. But for each of the intervention, you'll find information on how to implement it, some of the risks and limitations. This can include, for example, technological lock-in for energy systems, and you'll also find a lot of information on the co-benefits. So what type of co-benefits are being delivered by those specific intervention. And then a little bit further below, you'll find some information to build your business case. And this is everything from the cost, your return on investment, the abatement cost of carbon. So this is the amount of carbon that you will save for each pound spent. And then same as the enablers, you'll find some quick implementation steps, as well as the type of resources or partnership that you'll need to build, and then potential funding sources. There is also a funding guide included as part of the tool, and some case studies.
Great. So just going back to that filter that Letitia mentioned, so there are in order of sort of 100 to 200 of these, and so choosing between them and filtering out the ones which are appropriate for you can be quite a challenge. So using some of those fields that you've seen in that one example one that we've looked through, then for example, you can filter out those that have different ROIs, costs, and let's say are able to be implemented by a local council, which will then produce a list which is much more manageable. And so you can start filtering and choosing. However, I think we would always recommend that you have a quick look all the way through the list, just to make sure that you're not missing something or that we have over-filtered. We'll now move on to the Your Potential Impact page. So this is showing against all the enablers and interventions that we've shown you, roughly how many you've picked, and then how many of the benefits that were available to you, if you picked all of them, you've unlocked. So this first diagram is showing your responses shown by category for all the different enablers. So here, because we filled out all the questions, then everything is nicely filled out for us. And then moving on to the carbon savings and co-benefits. So here, because we've not chosen really any of the interventions, then this is not very filled in. But you would find that each of these has a different stacked bar chart on it, which then shows out of a maximum score of 4, what percentage of that co-benefit has been unlocked by the interventions that you chose. It's probably worth mentioning now that not every intervention that you choose has a positive co-benefit score. Some of them can be mildly negative. Is there anything you'd like to add before we finish up?
I think I'll just give the example, for example, on the negative co-benefit. If you are going with energy from waste, this may create some air pollution, which would have a detrimental impact on health and well-being. So again, co-benefits are really important, but it's important to look at them in context. And now we are just going to give the tool over to Ben from OnePlanet, who is going to explain how you can take this further with the export function. Thank you so much. Thanks.
I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Letitia. Thanks, David. So I hope everyone can hear me. Letitia and David have just taken you through how we use the Net Zero Navigator and arrive at your potential impact. Once you've completed that part of the tool, you can then export all of that information into the OnePlanet platform. So you just click on the export, and you can then create your plan. Initially, we've set it up for you to contact us so we can make sure that we help the first few people really get the most out of the tool, but that will become an automatic process over time. When you create your plan, it will export all of the information directly into the OnePlanet tool, and you'll get a view something like this. So in this case, we've selected about 50 interventions, and these are shown as the hexagons with an A in it, listed as actions in the tool, and they're all clustered around on the mind map these 4 co-benefits. So what we're trying to do is really highlight the beneficial impact that your climate strategy has on these co-benefits. If we look at any action, we can then see all of the information that was in the Net Zero Navigator is available here. So we can get all of that information. If we want to create a report, we move over to the the document view. So within the platform, there are 3 different views to see all the information. There's a mind map view, a table view, and a document view. And if we move over to the document view, again, we get all of that information, but now in a report format. So if we want, we can simply generate a PDF and download a report. But the goal of the platform is really to give you more ownership of the plan that you've created and enable you to customize it to your needs. So on any specific action, we can now begin to edit and make it much more relevant to our work. So if we've just selected an action around invest in training for all staff on sustainability, but we've already got a program, we can actually change them. We've got an investment stream ready. We can change that to implement the training on staff sustainability. We can edit all of the information we've set up on how the platform, or on how we're going to implement that, put some more detail on it. And we can also begin to start allocating actions to different people. We can put in completion date and to start giving the status of the action. And as we start implementing the action, we can track the progress of it, how we're getting on with implementing that, and understand how effective we are in implementing that action. The platform itself is built around a logical framework of outcomes, which are our goals, which are the co-benefits in this case, the actions, which are the hexagons, and we can also add in indicators. So if we want to start tracking the progress against specific goals, we can add an indicator and ensure that that's those units are put in and that we're tracking the performance against that. And that enables us to have a consistent framework against for tracking the progress against all indicators. Just to give you a little insight into the other elements of the platform, so the table view just allows you to see all of the actions in a list. So if we want to go through all of them and check the progress on those or change the name, we can do that here and scroll through all of those actions. And then finally, the action plan itself is set into an account that allows you to create several plans and connect them all together. So we can start looking at how different departments can collaborate to deliver a plan. Now, I'm just going to show you an example of a different plan where we've set that up. So the account itself is all centered around what we call an ecosystem plan. And this is the shared plan that all departments can collaborate with. So if we open up that ecosystem plan, in this case, we've looked at an example climate strategy for a local authority and mapped out the goals and the indicators, or some of those goals and indicators, and map those out onto the mind map. In the ecosystem plan, we just have outcomes and indicators. It's very much the vision of what we want to achieve. And if we then allocate those outcomes and those indicators into specific departmental plans and even into stakeholder strategies as well. So if we look at one of these indicators, for example, we can see here that that this indicator has been adopted into 3 plans: the climate, transport, and health and well-being plan. And actually, if we clicked on these icons, we'd be able to open that plan. So what does that mean? If we just look at the dashboard again, we can see there's a section departments. So in this example, we've created 5 departments within the local authority in education, health, transport department, and created plans within those departments. So if we look at the health department and the plan there, we can go in and we can see we've mapped out the specific goals in the local authority health and well-being plan, which are the outcomes that don't have a circle around them. And we've also then adopted in goals from our ecosystem plan. So active and sustainable transport, we've adopted that in from the ecosystem plan. Our plan is now connected to that strategy, and also an indicator as well that has been adopted in. But by setting things up in this way, we can begin to see the overlap between our two plans. So just as an example, there was an action in our climate plan around promoting active travel. Within the health and wellbeing plan, we had an action around increasing active travel. So we've now got these two actions that we can see are very similar. And within our climate plan, we can almost allocate responsibility for that action to the health and wellbeing department, and start to see how we can get our climate plan to cascade throughout the local authority, but also drive the understanding of co-benefits throughout the local authority as well. We can still generate a report of our overall progress in much the same way. And one other feature is just useful to highlight at this stage is that we can still get an overview of everything that's happening across the local authority. So we have an element of the platform called the Ecosystem Center. Within that, we can see what everyone is doing to contribute to our plan. So if we just show one element of this, again, looking at active and sustainable transport, we can see now all of the actions that are being delivered to meet that goal. Some of those actions are in the transport plan. Some of those are in the, those are all in their transport plan. Some of those are in the climate plan or the joint health and wellbeing plan. So we can see how all of these actions are being allocated across different plans. And actually in this example, we can also see there's a couple of actions which are on a dotted green line. These actions have been adopted in from a stakeholder plan. So it's organization using the OnePlanet platform within the local authority, but is not part of the local authority. But they have still adopted this goal, and they're showing the actions that they're delivering around contributing to that goal, creating walking and cycling routes, providing cycling facilities. So this gives an example of just how we can start to get the climate plan embedded into the local plan, into development agreements, and actually getting local businesses as well to contribute to delivering that plan. And we can also track progress on indicators. So we can see how that we're doing at an indicator level across the whole local authority, but also the contribution that each plan is making. So that was just to give you a very brief overview of how, having used the Net Zero Navigator to identify your key interventions, they can be imported into OnePlanet to enable you to customize them to your local context and to start using the platform to implement those interventions, and also then look at how you can use the platform to move your plan out of your department and actually cascade it throughout the local government as a whole, but also into your wider stakeholders within your region. So I'll hand over there back to Bob and Puran to go through the Q&A, I think.
Thanks, Ben. We've actually got a few quick polls that we'd like to run. If you could stop sharing, Ben, I'll put those up on the screen. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so keen to get your feedback on these questions. So the first one is, which part of the local authority do you think should be driving climate action? So there's one answer only. We're going to give you about 20 or 30 seconds, just a very quick top of mind response to this. And I believe we will see the results live. Bear in mind, we're asking which part should drive climate action, not necessarily which part does drive climate action. Okay, can we see the results, Gail? Oh, interesting. Okay, so we have the chief exec's office, which I think is the top thing there, 3%, individual departments 16%, and a dedicated function at 49%. But interesting, we don't have a strong dominant view on this. There's quite a bit of diversity, which is just interesting. Okay, next question. What is the biggest blocker, other than funding, to effective climate action within your local area? And we had to take funding off the list here because otherwise everyone will, of course, say funding. So is it getting other stakeholders in the area to work effectively together? Is it actually getting different parts of the council to work effectively together? Is it measuring, reporting progress against actions? Or is it a lack of knowledge or a lack of capacity? There may be other things as well, but unfortunately, with this functionality, we can't offer an other specify option. Okay, I think it's probably enough time for that one. Let's have a look. Okay, interesting. Capacity within the council comes through as most strongly. Getting other parts of the council to work together slightly higher than other stakeholders. Okay, it's very interesting. Thank you. And then the final one, having heard the speakers talk through the functionality of the tool, and bearing in mind that we're planning a service offer to help support your usage of it, where would you anticipate benefiting most from support? So would that be using the software effectively, creating plans, refining plans, building business cases around particular interventions, actually implementing specific projects, capacity building, or help regarding collaboration and new ways of working? Okay, that's probably enough time for that one. Okay, interesting. So the business case piece is what's resonating most here, but actually there's appetite for support across all of those areas. So that's really helpful. And as I mentioned, we'll be inviting local authorities to join us in some sessions in the new year to help shape that service offer better, but that's a really good first guidance on that. So thank you very much. Great, so I'd now like to invite Hounslow, Ajit from Hounslow, to just share a bit of her experience of using the tool in beta. So I'll stop sharing now. Ajit, do you want to say a few words?
Thanks, Bob. So I'm Ajit Bansal from Hounslow Council. I'm the Programme Manager for the delivery of the Climate Emergency and Clean Air Programme. Hounslow declared a climate emergency in June 2019, and we spent the best part of 6 months developing our action plan, which we adopted in July 2020 whilst we went through extensive consultation. Our climate emergency action plan sets out the ambitious target of being net zero by 2030 from council operations, whilst working with residents and stakeholders to influence that wider borough emissions reduction. When we adopted the plan, our cabinet members agreed that they will report back progress annually, setting out the progress made from reducing our carbon emissions, from the actions that were being delivered, and it will also set out the additional work we will do for the year ahead. In June this year, we began reviewing the progress we've made since we adopted the plan. And whilst we were doing that analysis, we were made aware of the Net Zero Navigator tool, which was still in development in the beta stage. We were fortunate enough to utilize the tool to essentially identify the projects that we could take forward, that, as that Bob mentioned earlier, that were not within our plan. So as you saw in the tool, there are a number of interventions which we hadn't captured within our own, some of which we had not captured within our own action plan. And it really allowed us to stress test how we could improve it. The actions that we had identified that were new, we were able to discuss these internally with service leads and essentially explore how we could take them forward, as they would have enabled us to get to our net zero target quicker. There were also additional actions that we identified that, whilst can be badged as part of the climate emergency, we also thought they were quite valuable for other environmental programs we are running in the council, such as the Clean Air Programme and our Green Recovery Strategy. Overall, we thought it was a useful exercise as it enabled that discussion to take place between council departments, cabinet members, and our external partners, because it allowed us to demonstrate the benefits and the interdependencies between the different actions. We were also at a point where there was a lot of government funding becoming available, whether it's to do with green infrastructure, retrofitting. So it enabled us to form closer partnerships across the council. Our plan is essentially an evolving document, and this tool has been invaluable to enable us to develop it further, whilst exploring what additional metrics we could use to track progress within the different actions, as well as the reduction in our carbon footprint. The new mind mapping elements, which we've been demonstrated today, will be valuable in illustrating those interdependencies and allowing departments to understand how their actions will help us deliver the climate emergency action plan and embed those net zero targets across the organisation and take forward that culture change in governance that we need. Back to you, Bob.
Brilliant, thanks Ajit, and thanks everyone for your engagement and questions during the session. So we've got 10 minutes left. Apologies for overrunning somewhat, so we won't be able to cover all of the questions in that time. What I propose to do is we'll collect all of them, and any that we don't manage to answer in the next 10 minutes, we will do and circulate to participants afterwards. So at this point, I'd just like the panelists to introduce themselves, and then Letitia will queue up some questions for them to answer. So I think Puran we've met already, but perhaps Judith and Ed, you can introduce yourselves as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Judith Sykes. I'm a Director of Useful Projects and Expedition and have been Project Director for the original prototype tool. I'll hand over to Ed.
Hi, I'm Ed Parham. I'm Director of Innovation and Design at Space Syntax, and we did the original piece of archetyping around sorting local authorities into categories that could describe the transport characteristics. I'll pass on to Letitia. Looks like you've met Letitia already.
Yes.
We've probably spoken to everybody, haven't we?
I think so. So Letitia, do you want to do the honours of selecting a few questions for the panel to discuss in the time?
Yes, I was thinking if briefly Judith and Ed and then Puran from the OnePlanet, you could briefly talk about the unique selling proposition of this tool compared to other tools that are available to local authorities.
And actually, just at this point, there's a question that's come in, and I realise we haven't explicitly said this. The tool's free. Someone's asking how much is this going to cost, and yeah, I appreciate we probably should have said that up front, but yes, it's the tool will be free to use. The service offer that we're developing may have some paid for components, but the tool itself will be free of use. Handing over to the panel.
Shall I kick off and then others can introduce? And I think in answering your question, Letitia, perhaps I can also pick up some of the questions that have been made in the stream as well. So as part of the work we did to develop the prototype, we did a great deal of mapping of existing tools that were out there. and so felt that there were quite a few that did try to do pure sort of carbon footprinting like scatter. There was some more granular work being undertaken, for example, by the City of Edinburgh in collaboration with the university, which had done a great deal of work in trying to evaluate carbon emissions from different projects, which was incredibly complicated. So we felt that where this tool in particular provided more support to local authorities is that it's a strategic planning tool. It doesn't do the sort of granular quantification, but it helps you set out the strategy. It helps you collaborate with other parties that you might be involved with, as has already been mentioned, but also communicate to members of the local authority, but also community partners and stakeholders of what the plan is. And I think just one thing to add in as well is in one of the responses about data in particular and avoiding sort of technology lock-in. One of the things we've been really careful for all of the interventions is to say how you go about implementing, what additional data that you need, and what the things that you need to consider to avoid unintended consequences. Thank you.
Okay, and if I can just add on to that, I think there's one of the bits I think is really interesting in the tool is that there's a logic model there, which is looking at two sides of an equation. One is the performance of an area, and the other side of it is what are the actual built environment systems that you can change and which influence those outcomes. And so just as an example on the piece of work on the transport typologies or categories, we had a whole load of information on the built environment, the street network, population density. We analysed that in relation to the mode share of every local authority. We could then start to see what are the physical characteristics associated with different mode shares. We can also then use that same data on place to categorize areas together. And we can start to see where there are local authorities that might have potential to make a mode shift. They've got all the conditions in place to get higher levels of active or public transport, but for some reason that's not happening. We can also see the thresholds where those behaviors become possible. And that helps you to see maybe there might be local authorities which it's really difficult to get people, they might be car dependent because they're lower populations, they're spread out over a wide area. And sometimes changing those things fundamentally is really difficult, but you can see how to mitigate it. And you could be encouraging clean car sharing clubs or something like that. The other case is that you can think about it from a long-term planning point. You might be able to see that you have got the street characteristics in place, you've got the population, but the density is not there. And so you could be using that to make longer term policy decisions about where to allocate growth to allow to put in place the conditions associated with these positive or with these different transport outcomes.
Thank you so much, Judith and Ed. Paran?
Yeah, thanks, Letitia. Yeah, so I think one of the things we're really keen to do is help different departments work together around these co-benefits, or the shared outcomes as we call them in our system. And some of the feedback we've got from local governments is that the climate strategy just sits in one department and it becomes hard to engage other departments in that strategy. And if we can collaborate around co-benefits or shared outcomes, then I think we can start delivering a lot more with the same amount of investment, and we can start seeing how different departments can actually start joining up to create the change that we need. And just as a bit of clarification, yes, the Net Zero Navigator tool is free and it imports into OnePlanet. We're just looking at the right business model for across government, across local government, implementation of the technology. So that's why we want to talk to you over the next couple of months and get that right. And there will be other supporting services around that as well for local governments who want to use it. But do get started. It is the Net Zero Navigator tool is free.
Thank you, Paran. Then moving on, we've got quite a lot of questions around the data that is used. So I was wondering, David, if you could briefly touch on where we can find more information on the methodology, the type of data that is used, and whether or not that will be updated.
Yep. So just starting on where you can get more information about how we've processed and used the data. So if you go into the further information section, there's pretty extensive documentation, both of what the source of each piece of data is and then how we've processed it. And so going through that, and then if you've got any further questions, we're very happy to answer them by email or otherwise. Going forwards, like some of that information is going to fall out of date, either with the output of the census from last year, which will require a bit of correction, then other pieces of data that will come out. Bob, are you able to talk about what the strategy is for updating that going forwards?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we do want to make sure that, those key data sets are obviously up to date and kind of contemporary. The point I would make as well, though, is, of course, that, the need for action is urgent. And frankly, we kind of need to crack on, make and execute plans, within the next few years to address the climate crisis. So the point about sort of, the data being up to date in 10 years' time, too late. By then, need to get moving.
Yep.
Thank you, Bob. Sorry.
If anyone wants sort of more details, and then having the pieces of data that we have processed, then usually for each piece of information there's a download CSV button, or you can just get in contact and we're very happy to send those across.
Thank you so much. And then I was wondering from Ajit, we've had a few questions about how to actually use the tool as a local authority, whether or not you've involved other members of your authority, and how long it may have taken you to use the tool. I was wondering if you could provide a bit more information. Thank you.
So we used the toolkit whilst it was still in the Excel format, and we essentially did a bit of a team building exercise where we just sat down and went through the different actions that was set out, or the interventions that were set out in the different areas like transport, culture change, retrofitting buildings, and picked out what we needed, what additional work we could do going forward. That did take a bit of time, but it was a useful exercise going forward, because it enabled us to address what further work we could do to get to net zero. All net zero action plans or climate emergency action plans will be evolving documents that local authorities will be updating year on year. And I think one of the benefits of this tool is that when we used it in the beta form, we only used certain elements of it. So you don't need to go through the whole process. Like, we only looked at the interventions, and because we had a plan in place and decided which ones we wanted to take forward and which ones we didn't necessarily need to focus on at this stage. But if you are an organisation that is still developing the action plan, there will be a lot of benefit in starting from the very beginning, and that will take quite a few person hours, but it will be valuable.
Thank you so much. And then just to close it off, one of the key purpose of this tool is to encourage collaboration, and that has been one of the questions asked throughout the chat. So I was wondering, Judith, Ed and Paran, again, if you could talk about how the tool may encourage this type of collaboration both within and outside a local authority.
Just actually, before you jump in on that, I'm conscious we've got a minute left. I wanted to say to everyone, there's follow-up sessions you can see on the screen here. So getting started sessions open to anyone. And then focus groups in the new year targeted at local authorities. We'll circulate this deck afterwards. We'll also do an FAQ of outstanding questions, and we'll redo that poll and share those results with you. But for the final minute or two, please do answer that question.
I'll keep it very brief, because I think, Ajit, you answered it very well, particularly from an internal perspective. I think what's interesting is within the tool, we've illustrated what elements of the carbon strategy and climate strategy can be directly impacted by the work of the council, and then where you need to work in partnership with others. So, the point about DNOs or local transport organisations, we see this as a way of collaborating with those outside of your organisation, as well as how Ajit has described she's used it to collaborate with inside their organisation.
Yeah, and just reinforcing what Judith said, I mean, the OnePlanet platform is being used on projects around the world to create this collaboration, both within organizations, but also to reach out to the wider ecosystem. So the whole structure is based around collaboration, and we don't have many tools to enable that to happen in such a way which is real time, and which also enables you not just to collaborate, but also very easily to create reports around collaboration and track that as well. So yeah, we have a go and start playing with it, and hopefully you'll start seeing how it might help you.